Week 7 of the fantasy football season. He has running back start sits every matchup. This week, Thursday night, Denver Broncos at the New Orleans Saints. Javonte Williams, it's been an up and down season for him. And this offense as a whole, it's been a tough year for the most part for this Denver Bronco team. So this week, a tougher matchup at the Saints. I know last week, defense got torched 51-27, losing that ball game. But this Bronco offense is nowhere near Baker Mayfield and that Tampa Bay offense. So Williams this week in a ball game where I think they're going to try to get the run going early and often. I think it could be a back-end flex option in Javonte Williams, but nothing more than that, where his ceiling really hasn't been high this year at all with this Bronco team. Jaleel McGaw going to sit. We pretty much haven't seen much out of him except an occasional touchdown this season in 6 games is Jaleel McGaw. And in a tougher matchup, even though it could be a ball game, they're trailing and have to throw the football more where he's the receiving down back, I still believe McLaughlin, he's not really going to be a running back that's going to have value and do much. Alvin Kamara, he's a start each and every week. It doesn't matter if it's Carr or Spencer Rattler at the quarterback position. Kamara's still going to get his numbers, maybe not as elite as they were early in the season, but still that 15, 20 points per game. Even in a matchup versus a good defense, I think Kamara can hit that this week. New England Patriots at the Jacksonville Jaguars from Andre Stevenson. We'll see if he returns in this game, but they said it wasn't going to be a long-term injury for Stevenson. So they gave him the week off last week, and now he might return in this ball game going to London. So Stevenson, where he's had favorable matchups this season, he's been pretty good. So if he returns, he's a starter. And if he doesn't return, Antonio Gibson will be the starter, but his ceiling really hasn't been high. And this Patriot team, when Gibson's in there, they don't like running the football a whole lot to Gibson. So this week, even in a good matchup, if Gibson's the starter, he's still not someone I would have confidence in, especially with almost a full slate of games. Travis Etienne right now, he's week to week with a hamstring and banged up shoulder injury, so we'll see if he plays in this game. But if he does, he's a flex option at best as Etienne. His snaps have gone down over the last few weeks. We even saw Dearness Johnson get in that ball game, even though I know he was out of reach towards the end. And Tanks Bigsby didn't have a great game last week as well versus the Chicago Bears. But both these running backs, it's just a tough situation right now. And it's a guessing game for the most part. Who's going to get the most touches and have the most value week in, week out? So they're both flex options at best. Detroit Lions, Minnesota Vikings, Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, they're locked in. They're matchup proof. I know it's a tough matchup with the Vikings, one of the better defenses in the league, and they've been shutting running games down for the most part this season. 2 running backs, they're great running backs, and they're putting up points. With Jahmyr Gibbs, I know it hasn't been a monster season, but every game this season, he's had double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues. And Montgomery, he's been the goal line back, and in between the tackles, he's looked well, so they starts. Aaron Jones, if he plays, he's a must-start. He's been a top 10 running back all season. We know he's dealing with the hip injury, so we'll see as the week goes on what the practice reports are on him. And if he doesn't play, he's Jones. Ty Chandler will be a flex option because Chandler's a good receiving back out of the backfield. And even last week, we saw Rico Dotto have double-digit fantasy points in a blowout loss versus Lion team where running backs do put up fantasy points and they're catching the football well versus Lion team out of the backfield as well. Tennessee Titans at the Buffalo Bills. Tony Pollard, it's been a great bounce-back season for him after last year. I know he had 1,000 yards with the Dallas Cowboys, but the numbers really didn't add up as great games, game in and game out last season. But this year with Tennessee, he's the number one option pretty much in the passing game. No one's done anything. Will Levis has had trouble all season long getting the football to his wideouts. So Tony Pollard's getting big workloads. He could catch the football out of the backfield. And now with Spears banged up, we don't know if he's going to play. Pollard's a start. James Cook a start for me as well. We know Cook's a good running back. He could do it all. He's a 3-down back, one of the better backs in the league and up and coming as well, in my opinion. And I know in a tougher matchup versus Tennessee, it's going to be tough at times. But Cook, you lock him in weekly as a start. Miami Dolphins at the Indianapolis Colts. Devon Achane, I know he's coming off a concussion. Hopefully he does play in this game. But coming off a bye week, he should play in this ball game as Achane. And we know he's an explosive running back. And it just takes one big run for him to have a day. So I know the last couple of weeks he hasn't done much, but coming off a bye week, I think this offense is going to get things better with Tyler Huntley at quarterback, make it more comfortable. And let's remember, Huntley, he's only been with the team for a month. So right now, coming off the bye week, resetting things, Achane getting healthy, I think he could bounce back in this one. Jalen Wright, Raheem Mostert, I still believe they'll get work even if Achane starts in this game. But we really haven't seen much out of these two plays, especially Mostert. He missed a majority of the season so far in the early going with the injury. And Jalen Wright, he's had a couple decent games with touches, and we've seen good flashes, no doubt about it, but he's not much of a receiver out of the backfield as well. Now to the Colts, I don't know if Jonathan Taylor is going to play, but if he does, he's a must-start. But if it's Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson, Goodson looked good, but the touches still weren't there. He had, in that one, 10 fantasy points was Goodson, where if he got an expanded role, then he's someone I would have confidence in. But this week, with team playing about, he's nothing more than maybe a back-end option, but I still would sit both these players. Seattle Seahawks at the Falcons. Kenneth Walker, he's locked in as a top 10 option each and every week since he's returned to the lineup week 4. The Detroit Lions, he's been locked in, Kenneth Walker, and he's putting up big ball games, catching the football out of the backfield. He's a vocal point in this offense, and this week in the fast turf at Atlanta, I think he goes out there, has a good game. Zach Charbonnet has said if Zach Charbonnet did step right back in as the starting running back and get more consistent touches, he would be a start, but he hasn't done that in this offense now since Walker's been back the last 3 weeks. So he's a sit. Bijan Robinson finally had a big ball game, finding the end zone last week twice at the Carolina Panthers. And we know Bijan's a great running back. We know the talent's there, and he went in the first round. Like I said last week, coming off easily his best performance, 25 fantasy points. He's a must-start in this one now. To Tyler Algier, he had 18 carries, 105 yards, found the end zone, but the workload hasn't been there week in and week out, but definitely someone to own in 10, 12 fantasy team leagues. He's one of the top handcuffs in pro football, and like I said in another video, if he was on any other team, or most teams I should say, Tyler Algier is a top 10, 15 running back weekly, but this week, I don't think they're going to give him all those touches. It was some garbage time at the end of that ball game, so he's a sit. Houston Texans at the Packers. Joe Mixon, he's been great so far this season in the few games he played. I know he returned last week, had over 100 yards, found the end zone, and he's locked in this Houston Texan offense as a big threat and a big-time running back, so he's a start even in a tougher matchup at the Packers. Josh Jacobs, it's been a decent first season for him for the Green Bay Packer team. We haven't seen that 30-point fantasy game, but he's a consistent 12, 18 points per game. And this week versus the Houston Texans, where they're going to try to stop Jordan Love. Josh Jacobs can have a good ball game this week, and he's a start running back. Cincinnati Bengals at the Cleveland Browns. Zach Morris, I know it was a down game for Zach Morris where he fumbled, but I believe he's going to be back into the lineup this week. It was the third quarter where he fumbled that football, and they went with Chase Brown. And to be honest, Chase Brown was the hot hand. And I also think that benching came into play where we know Zach Morris was dealing with an ankle injury. So after coming off a bad performance with 0.50 fantasy points, it can't get any worse than that. I think Zach Morris still is a flex option this week after the bad performance. And Chase Brown, a flex option as well. Chase Brown, he looked good in that ball game. I know he scored the touchdown towards the end versus the New York Giants. And this week, it's a tougher matchup versus the Browns. I know the Browns have had trouble all season stopping teams, but for the most part, they've been good stopping the run. And Chase Brown, if he didn't score that touchdown late in that game, it was a mediocre game for him. So both these running backs this week are flex options. Nick Chubb, it looks like he's going to return in this game. Jerome Ford, I'm not expecting him to play, where he was ruled out quickly with a hamstring injury. And we know those hamstrings take weeks to heal or even months. So if Nick Chubb's back, he's going to get a decent workload, but I still believe only 60% of the touches, so he's a flex option. Deonta Foreman, Pierre Strong, there sits. I know Strong, he looked decent in last week's game. Foreman, it was an all-right ball game for him, but with Chubb back in the lineup, him and Foreman are pretty much similar running backs. You're not going to catch much out of the backfield, and they're going to be in between the tackles and first and second down backs with value if your team has a lead. This Chubb with his upside still, even coming off injury. And Deonta Foreman and Strong, we haven't seen much out of them this season, so that's it. Philadelphia Eagles at the Giants. Saquon Barkley, he's a start each and every week. I know last week wasn't a great game for him, but you know, this game, a lot of people are going to boo him over there after he left for a division rival, and even people burned his jersey in the offseason. So Barkley, you know, he's going to have a chip on his shoulder to go in there versus his former team and stick it to them with a big ball game where they just didn't want to give him a long-term extension and play games with him for a couple seasons with the franchise tag, and got the deal from Philly. So Barkley, each and every week, he's a must-start. It wouldn't be surprising to me if he goes into MetLife and he explodes over 100 yards and finds the end zone. For the Giants, Tyrone Tracy, he's a start for me. 2 weeks in a row, over 100 total yards for him for this New York Giant team. And he's taken this backfield by storm. So Devin Singletary, he might have been the odd man out now with Tyrone Tracy looking good in this Giant team. Let's be honest, they're going nowhere this season, 2-4. I know the division leaders only 4-2 with the Commanders. Eagles and the Cowboys only a game up on this New York Giant team. But Devin Singletary, if he plays, I just believe Tyrone Tracy, at worst case, is going to get 50% of the touches, and he has more upside at this point than a Devin Singletary. We could catch the football out of the backfield, explosive in between the tackles, and the Giants like what they're seeing from him. Las Vegas Raiders at the Rams, it's a tough situation in the backfield, but at least Alexander Mattison has looked decent over the last couple of weeks. So this week, I think in this matchup, he's a flex option is Madison. Zamir White, even if he returns, I don't believe he's going to get much work in the backfield for this Raider team. And Amir Abdullah last week, he was mixed in to the backfield for this Vegas Raider team, but he really didn't show much in that game. So he's a sit in. Madison is a desperation flex option. Kyron Williams, great matchup this week, coming off the bye, getting a little healthier. One of the best running backs in the league. He's a must-start. Carolina Panthers at the Commanders. At this point, Chuba Hubbard's a must-start as well. 4 games in a row with 90 or more yards on the ground. I know Jonathan Brooks practiced this week for this Carolina Panther team, but Chuba Hubbard's running the football great. Good receiving back out of the backfield where he's been a 3-down back. Miles Sanders at times has been getting work, but Chuba Hubbard's the man over there. And this week in a pretty decent matchup at the Commanders, he's a start. Brian Robinson, we'll see if he returns in this game. He's been pretty much a must-start running back. We know this Panther defense can't stop anything on the ground, where they gave up 200 yards on the ground last week to the Atlanta Falcons. So Brian Robinson to start. Austin Eckler, a flex option. If Robinson's in the lineup or not, Austin Eckler, he's had double-digit fantasy points in all the games he's played this season. So we know he's one of the best receiving running backs out of the backfield in it all season long. Where even with Robinson in the lineup, like I said, double-digit fantasy points in all his games this season. So he's a flex option. Kansas City Chiefs at the Niners. Kareem Hunt, he's a sit for me in this one. Kareem Hunt, I know he's looked good so far in the 2 weeks. He's got an expanded role. Going back to week 4 at the Chargers, and then going back to week 5 in that victory versus New Orleans Saints. Kareem Hunt, he could catch the football out of the backfield, but I just don't believe his ceiling's high in this ball game, especially in a tough matchup at the 49ers. Najee P. Ryan, he's pretty much been a passing downs, an occasional goal line, but more of a change of pace back, so he's a sit, not much upside. Jordan Mason, they saying he should be good to go in this game. He's a start. He's been one of the more better running backs in all pro football is Jordan Mason. 3 games over 100 yards, and he was on his way over 100 yards before he went out with the shoulder injury in that one at Seattle. But they said it's a must-need to have him in the lineup. He was going to play that game, but they sat him out as precaution. Isaiah Guerrero, he looked good. He's 10 carries in that ball game last week at the Seahawks, and they told him to slow down and slide to run the clock out, even though they scored a touchdown at the end of that drive anyway with San Francisco. So Guerrero, tons of speed coming out of college. He's a big physical back in between the tackles as well, and we saw the burst he had. So if Mason's out, he's a flex option, but if Mason's in the lineup, he's a sit. Obviously, he's Guerrero. New York Jets at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Breece Hall, I'm going to give him a nod in this one. I know the numbers haven't been great for Breece Hall, and I know Braylon Allen has been eaten into the workload, but Braylon Allen, his numbers really haven't popped off the box scores. Braylon Allen, I think Breece Hall, he's back on track. He'll get things going in this week's ball game, and it's going to be a ground and pound type of game. This is the game plan for both teams. They want to run the football a whole lot and play great defense, and I think we're going to see a ball game in the trenches between the Jets and the Steelers. Najee Harris, he's a flex option. Big ball game, no doubt about it last week, but a tough matchup this week versus New York Jets, and with pretty much every team playing this week, Harris is going to be a back-end flex option or low RB2 option for fantasy owners. Tough matchup. His ceiling's not that high, in my opinion, for Najee Harris. We saw last week it was a great matchup versus the Raiders, and he took advantage of it, no doubt about it. And Jalen Warren, I didn't list him on this graphic, but he's pretty much hasn't shown anything this season. He's been banged up with a knee injury, and he's not 100% as well, so he would be a sit. Monday night, Baltimore Ravens at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Derrick Henry, he's the best running back easily this season in fantasy football. He's a must-start. Sean Tucker, breakout game, over 192 yards from scrimmage, 2 touchdowns in that one with the monster performance in last week's victory at the New Orleans Saints. And Tucker, he's definitely going to earn now some touches in the backfield. And I think this Tampa Bay Buc team, just my opinion, Rachaad White, they're going to sit him out another week, let him heal 100% from the foot injury, where Sean Tucker and Bucky Irvin both had nice ball games last week. So Bucky Irvin had 18 fantasy points in PPR leagues. He found the end zone, and him and Sean Tucker is a good duo in that backfield, and I think they could find some running lanes. Even though it could be a tough ball game versus Baltimore, I think it's a Monday night shootout between these two teams. So both running backs are flex options where they're going to be in a split in the final game of the week and second Monday night game of the week. Chargers at the Cardinals. J.K. Dobbins, 3 games this season, 90 or more yards. running the football in between the tackles. So last week, a big workload, 25 carries, 93 yards, found the end zone for J.K. Dobbins. I know Vidal had a nice 38-yard receiving touchdown, but Vidal, we got to see more work out of him before he's a viable fantasy option. Vidal's definitely someone to own in 10, 12-team leagues, because we know Dobbins has a lot of injuries throughout his career and could go down anytime. He's more vulnerable, but he's a start this week because this Cardinal defense can't stop anyone. And last week, James Conner had a fumble, and he pretty much didn't see the field after that with DiMarcito and obviously Trey Benson getting work. But James Conner, he's going to be back in the lineup this week. This Cardinal team, they were down in that game anyway, and they preserved them after the fumble, I believe. And he's not really in the cast. It was just a rest type of thing, and the game was out of reach anyway. Why waste Conner where the game meant nothing and not get him hurt for no reason, down 18 points? That's running back starts it every matchup for Week 7 of the fantasy football season.